Hi, this is Amber with RV Homeschool, and I wanted to talk with you today about getting started with homeschooling. I've seen a lot of questions and things on mom boards and various places where people are considering homeschooling this next year, and maybe they had never looked into it before, and they're a little overwhelmed with thinking about how to get started with homeschooling and everything that they need to do. So I thought that it would be nice to just film this quick video because I seem to be answering this question a lot and it takes a long time to answer everything that I would love to say. So I thought I would just film a video and make it useful for you guys in relation to getting started with homeschooling. So the first and most important thing to know when you get started with homeschooling is that you will need to figure out what your state regulations are in terms of homeschooling. So in the United States, of course, homeschooling is legal, and that's federally set, but each of the states have specific requirements as to what they require you to do in order to be in compliance and not truant with your children in terms of homeschooling. So some of the states are super lax, like my understanding is Texas is super lax, and there's virtually very little that you need to do to notify or curriculum you need to do or testing requirements or anything like that. So some states are very relaxed. Colorado is a little bit more intense, and I'll kind of talk about what we have to do in our state. And then some of the really rigorous standards are states maybe like Pennsylvania. And if you're wondering what you would need to do for your state, the best place for this information is an organization called Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And you'll also hear them referred to as HSLDA. Because that's the abbreviation for their name. And this is a great organization to belong to. We belong to it, we always have, because you're getting legal advice from their collection of attorneys. You're getting specific advice for your state. And if you ever had an issue where you're getting, social services are showing up at your house because your kids have been listed as truant because you didn't realize you had to file some letter or something like that, this is the organization that kind of comes to your back and helps you in communicating with the school board and anything else that you need to do. Sometimes even with job issues and people not having a high school diploma from a certain school, they're able to show that they were homeschooled and what they need to prove for completion of high school, things like that. So we haven't really needed them for much other than every year I file our notice of intent. I'll tell you about that in a second. So I go there for resources to see what the latest news is. They send out a magazine so they show different legal cases and what's on the ballot maybe in your area or on a nationwide scale, and things that are changing, adjustments and changes in homeschooling in general. So there's a lot of useful information. You also get various discounts to different homeschool type things, Office Max for printing materials. You'll get an ID card that shows you're a teacher because you can get teacher discounts. Even as a homeschooling teacher, you get a lot of those teacher discounts. So things like that. It costs us $10 a month. I think you pay less if you buy it on an annual basis, but we just do it on a month to month. So that's the organization. One of the things though that they'll show you is what your specific requirements are for your state. So we live in Colorado, and even though we travel a lot, even when you travel a lot, you always go based on the state where you have declared residency, and so that's the state where you're following their homeschool guidelines. And in Colorado, our requirements are that the first thing is we have to file what's called a notice of intent. So this is a statement, a letter that goes to the school board, the school district, that says that you are going to homeschool. And in Colorado, you have to do this 14 days prior to the start of your homeschooling school year. So for me, we start in August, and so I always just send this to my school district in July. I let them know well before 14 days in advance that we're homeschooling. We always have. I think they expect it from me. They send me back an email that says they've received it. Some places will sometimes people will send this as a certified mail to get that stamp that comes back that shows that you sent this in on time. Different states have different requirements. So in Colorado, like I said, it's 14 days. So you couldn't just decide that you want to homeschool and pull your child out of school that day and start homeschooling them the next day. Although I guess technically you could use an umbrella school to get around that. So if you actually want to do that, send me a message and I'll let you know how you can work around that. In general though, it is the summer. A lot of people their kids are out of school right now, and if you're thinking about homeschooling come fall, Just figure out what your state requires for that notice of intent. Homeschool Legal Defense Association will even have a template for you that you can use, because sometimes the school districts will try to get you to fill out their forms, and they want all sorts of information about you, and you don't legally have to provide all that information. You only have to usually provide a certain amount of information, and HSLDA will have a template for you that just provides what you need to provide to the school district, and you don't have to feel like you need to provide more information. So the notice of intent, that's important to do, and like I said, in Colorado it's 14 days prior to when you're going to start homeschooling. The next thing we have to do in Colorado is we have to actually have homeschooling done for 172 school days for the year, and those school days need to be 4 hours in length. So you're thinking 4 hours is nothing because a typical school day would be 6 or 7 hours. But let me tell you, when you're only having to school 2 or 3 students, or maybe you have 5 kids in your family, it's going to go a lot faster than at the public schools where, you know, a teacher's having to work with 20, 25, 30 students in a classroom. So your homeschool day will be a lot shorter. That's why we have that 4-hour length for a school day, because that is pretty typical for a school day. And depending on what we do, I'll tell you at the end of this video some details about what our typical school day looks like. But 4 hours is probably on the low end. 4 to 5 hours is pretty typical for us. So 172 days of 4 hours of educating. And for us, we school throughout the summer, so we school year round, and we do that because we travel a lot throughout the school year. And on those travel days, we're still getting education. We're still doing things like junior ranger programs when we go to different sites and things like that. We're going to historical places, but those are almost more like a field trip day. I'm not necessarily getting through all the typical language and math curriculum, language arts and math curriculum and all that stuff that I would be doing if we were just at home doing a traditional school day. So that's where I stretch the whole year out over the course of the summer, and it just helps everything stay fresh in the kids' brains, and I'm not having to reteach them last year's math for the first 3 months of the new year. So that's kind of what we do. That's just what we choose to do for our family. A lot of people have different methods out there, and you'll kind of decide what works for you. So that is the first thing, the legal requirements, and I highly suggest consider joining HSLDA. At least check out their website for info. They have a lot of stuff that's free, but a membership's going to get you a lot of extra benefits that I think are worth the $10 a month. So that was the first thing. The second thing is, how do you decide what type of homeschooling method or what type of curriculum you want? There's a lot of stuff out there, and there's really a huge spectrum when it comes to homeschooling. So there's probably what I would consider more kind of life experiences and student focused, and kind of letting kids work in their natural environments, and just kind of taking things in that they want to learn about, and stuff that might be more along the lines of like unschoolers. And you have, and it's not necessarily a full spectrum, but there's just differences. Then you can have, I would consider us to be probably on the opposite end of that spectrum, which is we do the classical method. So this is pretty rigorous. A lot of people would say it's probably too rigorous. You're losing the love of learning, and hopefully we don't do that, but I could see where people would say that. It's much more rigorous in terms of what I'm expecting of the kids, and how much we have to do in terms of kind of textbook and worksheets and things like that. They've been doing Latin since they were 4. These are just kind of some of the requirements that we do. So there's a huge spread of the way that you can teach, and what you find works best for your family and for your kids, and what you want to focus on teaching to your kids, and what are the life lessons and the things that are important to you, and what do you want your kids to have out of that experience. So I think a good way to figure that out is pick up this book. So 102 Top Picks for Homeschool Curriculum by Kathy Duffy. She has a 101 version as well, which this one came out I think 2 years ago. So the 101 Top Picks for Homeschool Curriculum might even be available at your library for free to check out. And of course, there's newer curriculum, so it won't have that in the older version, but a lot of the other information that she has in here is just as useful, and it's just the same in this version as it was in the other. What I really loved about this, when we decided that we wanted to homeschool our kids, I had no clue about all these different methods. We were not homeschooled. Jeremy and I went to public schools, and I later went to private schools, but we didn't even know any homeschoolers growing up. So we knew nothing. But one of the things that Kathy Duffy has that's so great is she has this quiz where she asks you to circle the things that are important in your philosophy for education. Like what do you want your kids, children, to be able to work as independently as possible? I think that would be great, but let me tell you, first and second graders, they're not working independently yet. They're too distracted by everything else that's around them. So, but ultimately, yes, that is my goal, is that my child can do that. For a teenager to get a strong background in the great books of Western civilization. So is it important to you that your child reads all of the classics? For us, that's very important to us. But for some people, they're going to say, I'm going to let my kids read what they want to read and what interests them. I'm not going to worry about them having to, read all these special great books. So you'll for sure be able to figure out what you feel is important, and you just go through and circle this. What I actually did when we took this is I copied I just photocopied the answers, and I gave one to my husband, and then I took one myself, and we just circled independently and decided what we felt was important, and then we went back and compared the results to see if we were on the same page when it came to homeschooling. And if you're not on the same page as your spouse, I can tell you that this is probably going to be difficult. If you're not even on the same page about homeschooling, this can be difficult. I think maybe what you do, because we are looking at a year where everything is changing about the way our public schools are going to be set up, and the interaction between teachers and students, and how the kids are going to interact with each other. I think there's no better time than now to give it a try if you've thought about it. And the thing is if you don't like it, or your student doesn't like it, your child doesn't like it, you don't have to do it forever. So there's no homeschooling police that says that you have to keep doing this, or that you have to do it throughout the school year, or that you have to keep doing it after the school year. So I have known people that wanted to do vacations, and so they pulled their kids out to homeschool, did their extended vacation, and then re-enrolled their kids back within the same calendar year. So that type of stuff can happen. I recommend trying to give it at least a year and just kind of see how it goes. What we had been doing, what most people had been doing in March, April, and May of this year with doing school from home with the quarantine and the COVID restrictions, that's not a typical homeschool day. That's not what homeschooling really feels like or looks like. So don't feel like that is what a homeschooling model should be either. That was really trying to make our best of doing public schooling at home with the resources we have and the time we have to put this together. And God bless the teachers for trying to make that happen as best that they could and making it work on the times that they could. But you can decide what's important to you, how you want to do your schooling, and then what example curriculums might work for that. So do you like the Charlotte Mason method, and is that probably going to work better? Do you want something that's secular, or do you want something that is maybe Christian based? And this will help you find out what type of curriculums work for what you think you're looking at. The other place where you're going to find a lot of useful information is different forums. So if you're on Facebook, for example, find a bunch of different homeschooling groups. So try to find what you can for your local area. Here in Colorado, we have a Northern Coloradan Homeschool Association. We have a Colorado Homeschool Support Group. There's a Well-Trained Mind group that I'm part of, because the Well-Trained Mind is a classical method, and so that's something we follow, and I'll go there when I ask about curriculum and things like that. So that's a great source of finding other people that are maybe similar minded to you, or even if you don't have people that have your same exact homeschool philosophy, there's still probably great resources and things that they know. And you may find that you don't really fit into one method or one mold, and sometimes we don't either. And so you branch from that, and you're a little more eclectic, and you are maybe doing unit study type stuff for a while. And then if you're traveling, when we're traveling, we're probably more kind of unschooling, but through the rest of the year, we're more classical. So you'll figure that out for yourself, but there are a lot of different methods, and Kathy Duffy's book will help you figure out what method you might like and what kind of curriculum that you have available. The next thing to know is you do have to do some planning. So you could have a program where you just enroll your kids at a homeschool online based public school system. So this is like the K-12 resources type stuff. And we have one of these schools here in Fort Collins. And basically you enroll your kid into the program. They're doing it from home, but all of the curriculum, the classes, everything is set by the teacher that they are using. So you're not necessarily independently teaching the curriculum. It's online, so it's basically allowing the child to do schooling but in a home situation. And that might be fine. And if you're working from home and you're like, I don't really want my kid to go back to school, but I don't know how I'm going to make this work, that might be the solution that really works best for your family and for your kids. And that's totally fine. You don't have to go out and develop anything major. Or we use a lot of different programs. We use a program for our spelling, and we use a program for language arts, and a different one for math, and a different one for science. And I've pieced those together because I have found that those are the things that work best for my kids and for my family. But if you don't have time to do that and you're a full-time working mom from home, then don't make it that complicated for yourself. You can still do this. You just maybe want to use something that is either more out of the box and ready to go, or it's online and you're utilizing other teachers, or it's through the public school system and they're setting everything for you and you're pretty much just letting your student work from home. So there's lots of different options and different ways to do it. And don't feel like you're less of a mom because you didn't do it one way or did it the other way. Speaking of feeling less like a mom, one of the things with homeschooling that I was very much concerned about, and I think a lot of moms are concerned about, is the idea of, what if I miss something? What if I don't teach my kid everything they need to know before they go to college? And then you step back, and I think I heard Sarah McKenzie talk about this. She was at a conference, and they asked, how many of you feel like you're not going to teach your children everything they need to know? And then the question was, how many of you think that you can actually possibly teach your children everything that they would need to know before they go to college? And the fact is that we can't. You got to do your best. You got to work with what you have and your students, and then you are their parent and you care most about them than anybody else in the world, and you will try to do what's best for them. So don't give yourself some slack. Don't worry about it. You will make the best of it and you will do a good job. In terms of doing that good job, one of the things that I like to do is plan out my year during the summer months. So pretty soon here, we're still working on some class stuff, but in July, after we do our testing, I'll sit down for 2 weeks and I'll just kind of plot out what our year looks like. And I don't go down to the detail of saying, on February 2nd, we are going to do this lesson and this lesson. And some moms do that, and they're amazing, and they have it planned out and they do it just like that. I don't plan that way because I don't find that it really works for me to do it that way. There's too many pieces, but Pam Barnhill has some great resources on planning your year out, and she has like different things like goals worksheets and ways that you can plot it out in different ideas on what you would need to do, how are you going to fit in your lesson plans, things like that. And so this is a great resource. This is on Amazon now. She has a digital copy too. So great resources like that will help you. But what I usually do is we like to do kind of terms, I guess you could call them. So we'll do 5 weeks of schooling, and I have a general idea of which math lessons, language art lessons, spelling lessons, things like that we're getting through in those 5 weeks. And then we do a week off. We don't usually have that whole week off. We're probably maybe playing catch up with something, or if we do have some time to have that week off, we're doing something fun, like doing a read aloud that the girls have really wanted to read, like one of the next Chronicles of Narnia books, and we just kind of do that, and we do some fun crafts and things related to it, and we do unit studies, and we just do fun stuff that are more craft related, because my girls love crafts, and a little bit less of kind of the rigorous like math drills and things that maybe are not their favorite things to do on a day-to-day basis. So that's how we plan our year. It also gives me some flexibility to do more planning in that week off for the next 5-week stretch. And in general, when I buy my curriculum, like we use Saxon Mathematics, I know that I can finish that curriculum. I should finish that curriculum in that calendar year or in that time period of my school year. So, and we usually will often finish it early because it was only 4 days. Well, it had only been 4 days of curriculum, and we usually go for 5 days, Monday through Friday. So you can definitely get through the curriculum. You should be able to probably get through the curriculum, but if you have a struggling student, keep working with them on something, because there's no reason to push a kid through to the next level because now they are officially the age of grade 3. My belief is that you help the kid until they have a mastery of that knowledge, and then you keep moving along. And one of the benefits of homeschooling is that you can do that. Your child's not just going to be pushed through to the next level if they really didn't understand something that was back here. You have the ability to help them work through that and understand that so that they can really achieve when they get to that next level. And that's also part of the reason, if you ask homeschool kids what grades they're in, sometimes they don't know, because they're like, well, in language arts I'm at 2nd grade, and in math I'm at 3rd grade, but in this I do this. So if you ever meet a homeschool kid and you ask them what grade they're in and they kind of look at you like deer in front of the headlights, that would be why. It's because things aren't always divided by grade. It's based on, a lot of times, your mastery of certain information before you move on to something else. And that's how we do it in our homeschool. The other thing is, after I've planned out a general idea, this is, I should get through the first quarter of Saxon stuff by November, and if I haven't hit that mark by November, then I know that we're falling behind and something's happening. And so, is that the student's fault? Is it my fault? Is there something else that we need to be working on, or that they're not understanding well enough that we need to kind of dive into before we can keep moving on? So that's why planning your year on a broad level is very helpful. And then on a kind of weekly level, I use a teacher planner. We're still very much paper-based in our homeschool. The kids are not on computers. They're not on devices. At 7 and 8 years old, I don't really feel like that's necessary for them. I feel like that's a lot of screen time that they don't need. And so we're still very much on like pen and paper, and I'm still plotting out our schedules in a paper planner. Now, if I had high school kids and I could tell them, okay, you need to work on this essay and you need to do this, I would probably be using a digital planning system, and I could just do a printout and say, here's your list for the semester, start working on it and check in with them regularly. So your high school kids don't need that level of detail, but when your kids are 1st and 2nd grade, you're pretty much sitting there with them, helping get them through the information all the way along. And then what I do is I have a sheet on Sunday. I go through and I say, this is what we're going to work on for the week, and I kind of have that on my sheet. And then as we finish the topic, then I place it into my homeschool planner. And I have videos on my planners. I'll actually probably do an updated video so you can see this, but I'll just go through and then write down what we did. So for me, this is a record of what we did for those 172 days of instruction that's required for Colorado. And we always go past that, so that ends up not being a problem. The other thing I need to keep a record of are vaccination records, or in this state they let you do a medical exemption. Obviously my husband's an ER doc, we vaccinate. And so I have the vaccination records for my kids, I keep that in my planner. I keep our testing. Oh, the other thing, Colorado requires testing of your children starting in 3rd grade, and then it's every other year, so 3rd, 5th, 7th, and so on. We've been doing testing since they were in kindergarten and 1st grade, just because Jeremy and I just feel it's really important for them to be able to do testing, to understand how testing works, to not have test anxiety. We had to do a lot of testing to get to where we wanted to go and to get into the schools we wanted, and we both have our graduate degrees. Obviously Jeremy has his doctorate, so we felt it was important for our kids to know testing. Some people choose to do their testing in a different format, or with on a one-to-one basis with a tester, a certified tester for the state. Other people use what's called an umbrella school, and they can completely avoid testing entirely. An umbrella school is kind of like enrolling your kid in a private school, so you follow the regulations of the private school, except they're not really doing any schooling. They're just kind of a name of a school. And so your vaccination records, your testing or lack of testing goes to the umbrella school. So it's a way to meet the requirements of the state, but not necessarily have to keep those records yourself. So a lot of people use umbrella schools and like the idea of umbrella schools. We've just not needed it, but there's ways around some of the stuff if you use them. So I'll plot it out once we've done it, and then I keep the copy of, we do ITBS testing just because it's the one I was familiar with as a kid, and it gives me a nice national standard on where they're at in terms of other kids their age. So I keep a copy of their testing, vaccination records, and then our general calendar year for the year on where our terms are, and then our day-to-day stuff in terms of our schedule and what we've achieved for the day. So that's how we go ahead and plan. So those are the big things. Know your legal requirements. Find what type of homeschooling method you would like, and trying to decide what kind of curriculum. And don't go overboard buying the curriculum. I think the biggest mistake people do when they start homeschooling is you want to buy all the things, because everybody has this great curriculum and oh my gosh, my kid needs that history program and that history program and this history program, and then you realize that you have 20 minutes for history and you're never going to get through all that information, and you've just wasted $300 on these different programs combined, and you're never going to get through it. So don't spend all the money on all the things. Try to decide what might be a good fit. Ask other people. A lot of times on the websites for the different curriculums, you can actually see what the sample program looks like. You might even be able to see what 1 or 2 lessons look like, and maybe you can even test it on your kid and see what they think and how they react to it. Sometimes the public libraries will have examples of the curriculum. You can't usually check them out for the whole semester, and you're not allowed to photocopy them, but you can at least get a feel for what the curriculum looks like and can check it out. And I've done that before with some different math books, just to see what it was like and if we would like it enough to spend, $100 or so on the actual curriculum. And you don't have to spend a lot of money. There are people that homeschool for free. If you really wanted to spend the time and just kind of develop your own curriculum and your own items and even your math, and okay, I know that my kid should be learning to count to 20 in kindergarten, so I'm going to help them do whatever they can with manipulatives and help them learn to count to 20. And you can do that, and you can do it for free, but it will be a lot less stress for you, especially if you're new. If you can buy something where it's already pretty much set up, you have a curriculum that is set to go, and you don't have to try to develop everything yourself, because that will be super overwhelming. I think those are a lot of the big things. A few notes about why we decided to homeschool. Like I said, Jeremy and I were not homeschooled. We didn't grow up with homeschoolers. We didn't really know anything about it. But when he was in residency, before we had any kids, one of the physicians, one of the attendings that he worked with, was traveling down to Ecuador and doing all this medical mission stuff, and he was bringing his elementary age kids along. And we thought, how is he doing that? How is it possible that his kids can do this? Shouldn't they be in school? And it's because they were homeschooled. So they schooled year round, and then they would take their kids on these medical mission trips that they would want to go do. And the kids had those life experiences as well. And the idea of bringing life experiences to my kids that they're really not going to get within the walls of a classroom, that was important to us. So when we had our daughter, really, I started aggressively researching it, trying to read a bunch of the books. Some of the books I could recommend: Teaching from Rest, which is from Sarah McKenzie. Great book. That's a Christian focus. So if you're secular, if you don't want the Christian base, you might not like that one. But that's a good one. For the Children's Sake, which kind of shows you the Charlotte Mason method. That's a good one that a lot of people like. I'm trying to think of the one that the homeschoolers love. I actually read it, and it's a wonderful book. A New York teacher that wrote it, and I can't think of it. I'll have to put it in the notes or in the comments. But that was an excellent book as well, and it just kind of talked about pulling kids out of that normal school environment that they have and trying to educate them in other ways that are more meaningful for them. Some of the people to follow in terms of blogs: Julie Bogart from Brave Writer. She's a great person to follow and has a lot of resources. Like I said, Pam Barnhill. She actually has a podcast on Your Morning Basket. Might have a different name now. Might be like Your Homeschooling or something. She has 2 different podcasts, and one talk about kind of the idea of a morning basket or kind of your morning wake-up time. So for a lot of people, we use this time as probably about like a 20-minute period at the start of the day. For my kids, this is when they're eating their breakfast, and we're either reading a book. So maybe like right now we've been reading the second book in the third book in the Narnia Chronicles. So I'll read to them while they're eating their breakfast, and then we'll have a discussion about that. So this is kind of part of that way to incorporate something that just wakes them up and helps them in the morning. This is also a great time to do prayer or Bible study or religious education stuff if you want that as part of your homeschool day. It's just, or you could incorporate poetry, or sometimes people do music or music studies. So this is meant to just kind of be a more relaxed time, wake them up, get them ready for the day, and then kind of jump into maybe some of the more rigorous stuff. In terms of Oh, so that was one of the reasons we decided to homeschool, is we wanted to have the flexibility with the schedule and to bring in life experiences. So when, it's been almost 2 years now that we bought our RV, and we've been traveling across the country with the girls, and we'll take them on these trips for 10 days, 2 weeks or more, and we'll go to the old battlefields across the country, and we'll go to the national parks, and we'll go see different things. And when you go to Mount Rushmore and you can actually walk around and see that and remember those presidents, and let's go through our president's song, because they have a president's song where they have all the presidents memorized, and you can take those tidbits that you're learning on your day-to-day school but bring it into life and make it exciting and a little bit more fun. It's like having a field trip on a regular basis. And homeschoolers love going to museums and the zoo and different things like that. And yes, they are socialized. We are in 2 different co-ops. So we have a co-op with our church, and so the moms take turns educating the kids for a 40-minute time period, and then they switch off and go to another class. So we've got a couple of hours where they are going and they're with a different group of kids. There's about 50 kids in the program total, and so the moms are taking turns teaching about things that they know. So we have a llama and alpaca farm, and I know fiber arts, so spinning, weaving, knitting, things like that, and I taught the kids all about this. And then we all did cardboard weaving on some little cardboard looms that I made for the kids, and they got to do a hands-on project. And this is part of that kind of socialization and hands-on stuff that we do. We're also part of a classical conversations community, and so this is the type of co-op that works really well for some people. Other people don't want something like this. But this is also where one of the moms is a tutor for your small group. So the kids, there's no more than 5 or 6 in a group, in a class, and they're learning memory work. Basically, it's memory work at this stage. But that memory work is helping put these little pegs of information. And I tell you, when I took my kids to Yosemite National Park and we saw this giant sequoia tree, and they had a couple of dates marked on the sequoia tree, and they had 1066 marked, and then they had 1215. And my kids knew that was the Battle of Hastings, and they knew who William the Conqueror was, and they knew for 1215 that was the Magna Carta. And I was so proud, and the rangers sitting there like, who are these children? And the cool thing is if you put those little pegs of information in their brains when they're kids, they learn this stuff. They don't know what it all means yet, but they have that information. And then as they get older, they can refer back to that, and they have a relation of where things are in terms of a history timeline and stuff like that. So that's what the classical conversation community does for us. The other huge thing it does is it brings the kids with other kids once a week. They have to do presentations, so they have to do a speech every week and get up in front of people and present about something. And what a great skill to start a 4-year-old with, so that they don't have fears with it when they're 14 years old. And for me, it's a chance to be around other moms and throw back ideas and say, hey, we're struggling with understanding how to read this, or I'm struggling with teaching my kid this in phonics. And people have other ideas and suggestions and curriculum choices, and so you learn so much from other people. So there is nothing isolating about homeschooling. Well, outside of COVID, I mean, right now is unique for everybody. But normally, my kids are highly socialized. They are going there around other kids, good kids, nice families. And it's not just kids their age in some small group. They're with kids that might be a little bit older, a little bit younger. They learn the family dynamics and that you're helping out. And if you're older, then you have to help the little kids and things like that. So it's been a great experience for us. So what does our day look like? So on those days where we have our homeschool co-ops, that will take up half of the day. So that's usually the morning, usually like kind of from 9 to noon, or for the one at the church, that was from 8 to noon because we had religious education stuff as well. So those would be the mornings. But on my other days, we're usually starting about 9, sometimes 9:30, depends on kind of when the kids get up and get going and have made their beds and done some of their morning chores and had their breakfast and stuff like that. So we're usually getting started about 9:30, and then we will spend that time up until 12:30 tackling the bigger subjects first. I call them the bigger subjects. So language arts and mathematics, because I feel like we have to at least get through those to really make it a functional day. So we always start off with those. For us right now, language arts is taking a little over an hour. And that's just because we do grammar, and we have reading, and we have phonics practice, and we have writing, and we have a spelling curriculum. So we have a lot of these things, and a lot of those are some of that stuff's incorporated into one program, but there's a lot of different programs. Like we have All About Spelling, that's just the spelling, and we have a Writing with Ease program that's just extra writing. And I feel like language arts is really important, so we focus a lot on that. So that'll be about an hour and 15 minutes. Then we move into math, and that usually takes up another hour, maybe only 45 minutes. It just kind of depends on the day. The kids are actually pretty quick with math and quick to get the math and then work through their math worksheets. And we use Saxon for that, and so they have math drills that they have to do. They always hate the math drills, but I make them do them anyways, and then they have their worksheet that they have to get through. So we do that, and then it's usually time to take a break, prepare lunch, get lunch ready for everybody, and sit down as a family and eat lunch. My husband does telemedicine from home, so this is also his break time. So we eat together as a family. We take that hour long to eat. The kids kind of get like recess playtime outside or indoors if it's the weather's bad or something. And then at 2 o'clock, we are back to work, and we're doing our subjects like history, geography, Spanish, we do Latin, science, art, music. So we do both music theory, and then they both play an instrument. We don't do all those things all the days, so I don't want you to mistake that. So we'll probably do geography 2, maybe 3 times a week, depending on how rigorous it is. We'll do history a couple times a week. We'll do science. I try to do science more like 3 times a week. Both of my girls really like science, so it's a fun one to do. Music practice, I wish we did every day, but we don't. That's probably 2-3 times a week as well. Art's a little bit easier to get in there. I try to do a little bit of Spanish and a little bit of Latin every day, even if it's just kind of singing some of their declension songs or something, just so that they're still getting that practice and they're hearing it, because with language that's so important. So that's what will fill up our afternoons. So then we're probably finishing with that stuff about 4 o'clock, 4:30, and that's the time for us to go out and do farm chores and things like that. So they still have requirements for, getting the chickens' eggs and feeding the cats, the barn cats, and stuff like that. So we'll work on that, and then they get to have play, fun, time, whatever they want to do, and mom gets to go get in a workout. And that takes us up till we're making dinner and getting ready for dinner. So that's what our typical school day looks like. It's different when we travel, and I have a blog post that I put together about how we do road schooling, I call it, or like traveling, and how we're doing the homeschooling on the road. And so it's a little bit different when we're on the road, for sure. And I'll put that in there in the blog post. So hopefully this was useful. Hopefully it gives you some ideas on what you need to do to get started, or what could be useful to get started. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I am more than happy to offer what advice we have. We started doing kind of, I guess I'd say homeschool when our oldest was 2.5. So I got a little preschool box thing that was delivered to the house, and a lot of the stuff was like cutting out and coloring, pigs and sheep and counting to 5 and stuff like that. But I called it organized play, because she was mostly still playing, but there was an educational component to it. And so we started homeschooling when she was 2.5. And by the time she was 4, we were doing a little bit more steady, like actual curriculums and programs and stuff. So they're used to it. Are there days when they don't want to do stuff and they want to fight me? Absolutely, that happens. But for the most part, they know that until at least language arts and math are done, they're not getting playtime. They're not getting anything else. And so that's just kind of how we have set up our days and what the expectations are, and they seem to work with it. And we've never had any issues with the school district or anything like that, so I don't want you to worry too much about that. Just be sure that you're doing things by the book and what you need to do, and figure out those legal requirements so that you don't run into any problems. So hopefully this was helpful, and like I said, let me know if you have any questions and I'm happy to answer them. Thanks so much for watching.